You're listening to episode 127 of the D6 Podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. How are you doing, Ron? It's fall.
It is, and I'm enjoying it. There has been some amazing things happening with the D6 conference we just got back from, as well as 3 of them that happened over in Southeast Asia recently.
Tell me more about that.
We'll go into it in another episode, so I'll kind of leave that tease out there. But we had the D6 in Singapore, in Malaysia, in the city of Kuala Lumpur, and we had it in Seoul, South Korea.
And Greensboro, North Carolina.
And we know that it's going to be in Orlando next year.
Oh, man, don't even get me started.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
This is a worldwide thing going on, this
right.
D6 movement. Awesome. Hey, today we're going to be talking about boys being men. You remember that group back in the 90s, Boys to Men?
I do.
Yep. This is showing my age at my high school prom. That was the theme song. Although we've come to the end. Do you want me? You're not singing with me.
Yeah, I do. You do not want me to sing with you, but I will listen. Get it?
Can't let go. Okay. I'll stop. Hey, so Boys to Men is the topic that our guest Andy Blanks is going to be talking about today. If you guys don't know about Andy, he is one of the founders of Youth Ministry 360. I bet my youth ministers that are listening know about Andy Blanks and Les Bradford and Roger Davis and their crew. Great group of organization out there that youth ministers just love, and they should. Now, if you're a children's minister, don't hear that and check out on me, because you have boys and they need to become men.
Yes.
And Andy does a great job of making sure all of us are included in that conversation. He's got a project out. Some of you, if you've ever, this is a pretty famous radio show. Have you ever heard of the Rick and Bubba show?
Yes, I have.
Rick and Bubba. Yeah, yep. Okay. If you're from the South, you probably have heard of Rick and Bubba, pretty well known. Andy is partnering with Rick from Rick and Bubba to put on a conference for dads and their kids, and they've written a book together called How to Be a Man. So he's going to be talking to us more about that after the break. And I
have Jimmy Myers. He's from Paradox Podcast. They do a podcast, and that's Pair, P-A-I-R. Docs, and they're both doctorates. They both have their doctorates, so they're Paradox.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they do an incredible podcast. They're from the Timothy Center as well, and the topic we're going to be dealing with is very complementary to what you're discussing with Andy. The question we posed is, what will students look like in the year 2030?
Ooh,
and so
nice.
What are the fundamental changes that we can do as parents to prepare our kids for getting to those years of manhood?
I'm just hoping we're not like that ship in Wall-E, where everybody's going around just staring at screens, you know.
Oh,
those overweight guys on the scooters.
Yes.
I'm always scared that's how we're going to end up. I hope not. Okay, so after the break, we're going to talk about how to be a man with Andy Blanks, and we will be right back. Hope you enjoy the break, but come on back, because Andy Blanks will be with us.
D6 curriculum is centered on the discipleship philosophy found in Deuteronomy 6, that parents and grandparents should be primary in the discipleship of their children. To accomplish this, D6 curriculum aligns every age in church on the same biblical passage or topic. Family alignment serves as a catalyst for parents to have conversations with their children about faith in the home. D6 also provides many other tools to help parents and grandparents. Learn how D6 curriculum can empower parents in your ministry at d6family.com.
I'm so excited today to be interviewing my buddy. I can tell we probably will talk a little bit about how we got to know each other at some point. But when I first started working in the world of ministry resources, it was a little bit overwhelming. There was not only a ministry side, there was a business side to it that I didn't really understand how to navigate. And our guest today, Andy Blanks from youthministry360.com and author of the book, How to Be a Man, and the How to Be a Man event or conference. We're going to be talking more about that. He was one of the ones that just really came to me as a friend and just helped me. When he could have seen me as some kind of competition or anything like that, instead he chose to just truly help me. And so for that reason, I'm so glad to introduce Andy to the D6 Nation on the D6 podcast today. Let me give you a little bit more of an official welcome. Andy Blanks leads all the content creation for YM360. So if you go to youthministry360.com, you will see if you're a youth minister, it is a beautiful world. If you're a children's minister, I think you're going to find a ton of stuff there as well that you'll enjoy. It's not all solely youth ministry based. So he's done the blog post, the resources, the workshop. He's been doing it since 2003. He lives in Birmingham, Alabama. Unfortunately, he's a fan of the Auburn Tigers, but fortunately, he's a great husband and a father. He also has just recently released a book called How to Be a Man. His co-author with that is Rick Burgess. You might recognize him from the radio show that's popular in the South called The Rick and Bubba Show. Many of you may not. And if you don't know about that, Google that while you're listening to this and open up another tab because that's a funny show. Rick from Rick and Bubba and Andy have put together not just a book, but an event on how to be a man. He helps with fathers and sons and their relationships. We're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to talk about how to be a man. But before we go too far, and he's an ex-Marine, I always want to honor that because I think that's pretty amazing. He can kill you if he needs to, but he won't. He's just going to help you today. My friend, Andy Blanks. Thanks for being here, brother.
Jeremy, that was maybe the best introduction I've ever got in my life. So I'm going to start calling you now about once a week, if that's okay.
You know what? A professional introduction business would be kind of amazing. Hey, this is not my first time to interview you, so I'm going to give people a little spoiler. This is going to be awesome. So, by the way, you need to be awesome. I just put my name on the line.
A little pressure. That's a little pressure, buddy. And thank you so much for having me. And I will say this. I told you earlier, and I'm not just saying this, you're one of my favorite people. And I love what D6 does. It is such an honor to be here with the D6 community. Just believe so strongly in y'all's mission and love the work that you do there. And you're one of the real good guys. So it's an honor to be with you.
All right, brother. Now that we've loved on each other a little bit, let's get down to it. Now, I do hope people will check out youthministry360.com. You founded that, you co-founded that, and you have done so much cool stuff with that. If somebody's a youth minister especially, I hope they check it out. But I think today we're going to kind of dive in because obviously D6 and the family part of that. We're going to dive into this book and this event that you've done called How to Be a Man. Can you tell us the story? Tell us how you got to know Rick from Rick and Bubba. How did that happen?
Yeah, so a fun little connection there. Rick and I and his wife Sherry and their children, we've gone to church together for years, and we actually met through our church's youth ministry. So I actually taught Rick's kids. He's got 4 children here, and taught 3 of them. And just passing through the youth ministry, got to know him, and then his wife Sherry, who is a fantastic author in her own right. She and I taught one of their sons together in a group one year, and that sort of started our friendship. Rick and I, and we'll get into this, we also kind of bonded over our shared frustration, maybe if that's the right word, of just having both spent years in the ministry space and seeing a real void where it comes to dads investing in the lives of their children, primarily spiritually, and investing in their marriage spiritually. And so Rick and I just kind of honestly over conversations about that and what we were seeing, really, in hindsight, obviously it was God leading us together, but said, hey, we're gonna kind of cross our networks here and let's see if we can't join hands and do something to try to begin to make a difference in what we see as a real kind of spiritual apathy in the lives of many men. Not all men, because there are certainly some men out there who are just killing it when it comes to discipling their teenagers. But yeah, we really kind of bonded over that, just saying, hey, let's start working together to do something about this.
And you guys did an event a few months ago. It's an event for dads and sons called How to Be a Man. So how did that go?
Yeah, the event actually, just so people can find a website, we actually titled the name. We were going to title it How to Be a Man kind of event. We actually ended up calling it Make Ready Weekend, just for clarification. No, it's okay. You're right. It was kind of headed that direction. It was actually for dads and children. And I don't know, Rick and I both realize that there's men's conferences out there, but I don't know of another conference, and maybe you guys at D6 are doing some of this, but where the focus was on dads and their children in the room together teaching discipleship principles. And so we had, close to 500 dads plus their children in a room, and we spent the weekend, Friday and Saturday, not only challenging them to be the spiritual forces in the lives of their children, with their kids sitting next to them, by the way. So a nice little dose of conviction there. But we equip them. I believe most men want to impact their teenagers, want to impact their children, but they don't know how. So we equipped them at this conference. We taught them discipleship principles. And the neat thing is that we carved out space over this event for one-on-one discipleship between dads and their children, and gave them the curriculum for that. And Jeremy, I'm telling you, the feedback from that event and just the stories we saw, it's life-changing. And we take no credit for it. It's the work of the Spirit, but it's waking up men to the fact that, hey, God has a powerful mission for you in the lives of your teenagers, the lives of your children. And too often, I think men just sort of pass that over to their wives. And of course, we know that God's plan is for mom and dad to be influencers of their children's faith. We see that in Proverbs and throughout Scripture. But I think for some reason, men have passed that off to mom. And mom wasn't meant to do that by herself. And there's a voice for men in the lives of their children. And to see men be awakened to it and equipped, I mean, it was powerful stuff. So, yeah, it was a great event. We're going to do a few more of those. We're trying to figure out a way to maybe even get that national. So it's a fun time right now.
Okay, so somebody listening to this might have just lit their wood on fire as they listen to this, and they're like going crazy, like, I need to do this in my church. They can contact you and find out more at makereadyweekend.com. Is that right?
There is a website, yes. You can email me, Andy, at ym360.com. We're actually talking to a couple churches right now about doing one. And right now, I think the best place we are now is bringing it to your church on a network level or a church level. And but we're in some talks about trying to figure out a way to broaden that horizon a little bit. But yeah, it's been cool, man. People told us, there's no money in it. You can't do it. Dads won't show up with their kids. And to be perfectly honest with you, we felt like we couldn't walk away from it. It was just such a strong call from God on our lives, and the fruit has been really powerful. Jeremy, it's been pretty cool.
And not that you aren't the coolest guy ever, but if somebody has a church, especially in the Southeast, and they tell people Rick from Rick and Bubba's coming, it's probably going to be an easy way to get people there, right? I mean, He's pretty well known.
Yeah, Rick talks to over 1 million people every week on some platform. He's a godly dude. He's a very powerful voice and is super passionate about discipleship. Rick has a really interesting story, and many of your listeners may know this. Rick and his wife, Sherry, lost a son, their 2-year-old son, Bronner, about 10 years ago or so. Actually, it's not even been that long. And so his wife, Sherry, wrote a book about that is a national bestseller. And really, they come from a place of God. It's a great story of brokenness and healing, and the perspective that Rick brings as a parent who's kind of been through that valley and come out the other side with God's help. It is a powerful perspective. And so, yeah, if people are interested about having this event at your church, and really, again, instead of not just challenging men to be the the spiritual, key spiritual influencers in their children's lives, but equipping them. That's a missing piece too often. We're having a ball doing it, and I think God's really doing some cool things. It's just fun to be a part of it.
There's some transferable things here that I want to make sure the people that are listening are hearing, because, I just believe wholeheartedly that as ministers, we should be more like tour guides, and we should set up experiences for parents and their kids, like a spiritual matchmaker, where we have an environment where we bring them together and they can practice while we're there to help. And that's what I think I love the most about the event. And you said, hey, we challenged them, but we didn't just challenge them. There's one great thing. We don't just guilt trip, right? And then we equipped them. So we all of a sudden said, you're saying to those dads, you're not alone. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. We can help you. And then the final thing that I love the most is that you coached them right in front of you. You gave them something small that they could do right there and start to whet their appetite and get the taste for it while you're there to help.
That's right, dude. I remember why I love hanging out with you, because you think about these things so well. You're exactly right. You said that much better than I could. But that is the model that we fleshed out. What I've found over the years, especially with men, and with boys, to that matter, doing youth ministry for years, is too much challenge without equipping leads to frustration. I can only be told so many times, you need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. If you don't equip me, I just get frustrated. I throw my hands up. And so I think one of the things the churches have done, there's stats to back this up, we kind of beat men up a little bit. And I'm not saying men don't deserve it, but if you beat on somebody long enough without helping them with a solution, you're just gonna run them off. And so we're trying to come at it with a little bit different angle. And I think that you said it really well, just coaching people through it, focusing on the takeaways, and then again, teaching them repeatable steps that they can go away and do on their own.
All right. So, Jackie, many of y'all don't know about Jackie. Jackie is one of the team members that helps listen to the podcast and pull out the things that are tweetable and quotable. Jackie, I'm going to make your job easy right there. Too much challenge without equipping leads to frustration. There you go, Jackie. Pull that out. And if anybody else wants to, Andy, can you give people permission to say that and act like they said it so they can sound smart?
Well, I have said this for years, and I know you'll agree with me. I tell people, if my arrow fits your bow, shoot it. I don't care. Because guess what? It didn't come from me. If I said anything that's worthwhile, it's the Holy Spirit speaking through me. So take it, steal it, run with it, whatever.
So, hey, guys, you can sound smart today, and you have his permission. You don't even have to try. That's good. All right, so listen. The topic that we're nailing down is, how do we minister to dads? How do we inspire dads, especially with sons, and the idea of teaching them how to become a man. So, hey, let's I thought it would be fun to do this. Let's walk through, since we have all the generations. If I'm a father of a child, okay, an elementary age child, what are some things that I could be doing to prepare them for manhood in that stage? And by the way, I'm going to walk you through the stages a little bit: middle school, high school, college.
See, I feel like I should be listening to you on this. You're such a good voice when it comes to this sort of thing. I think for elementary students or elementary children, I think one of the most important things we can do is teach concrete lessons, right? Teach concrete stories. Model for them appropriate moral and ethical behavior, and tie it back to who God is, and teach that in a very concrete way, right? A very absolute way. And it's, so much with our elementary kids is just reinforcement, saying it over and over again. If it's worth repeating, repeat it. I mean, so much of Scripture is key concepts repeated over and over again. It's because we need those things. We need to learn, especially how busy our world is. I would say, from an elementary child's perspective, and especially from a spiritual perspective, Bible stories, right? And then connecting Bible stories with key, again, ethical or biblical principles that we see in those characters, attaching it to people. This is what we see David doing. This is what we see Rahab doing. This is what we see Jesus do. Like, tying it to those people, in concrete ways, and then just modeling, doing life with them. One of the things I've been so convicted about, Jeremy, and I think you'll agree, is that there's no difference between parenting and discipleship. And I realized this a few years ago when you hear a lot of Christian writers and Christian speakers, they almost sort of imply this disconnect, right? Like there's this thing we do over here that's parenting, and there's this thing we do over here that's discipleship. And it's like, well, wait a minute. No, if we have a holistic view of faith development, and if we take the Shema seriously, Deuteronomy 6, if we take that seriously, that we're supposed to be teaching these biblical truths in all areas of our lives as we walk along the road and as we lie down and as we get up, right? That there is no separation between parenting and discipleship. If I'm coaching my son on the ball field as a 7-year-old, that's discipleship. I'm showing him what it looks like to be a Christian man in an environment, in culture, leading other people and dealing with frustration and dealing with interactions. That's discipleship. That's not parenting. I mean, guess what discipleship also is? It's also when I sit down at night and read the Bible to my kids, or my wife sits down and reads the Bible to them. But discipleship is in the car with my daughter, taking her to a volleyball practice. I mean, that's the talks we have, the way we talk about music and media and relationships. That's discipleship. And so this idea that there's this distinction between parenting and discipleship just simply doesn't exist in my mind. We're either teaching teenagers and young people to be Christ followers, or we're not. And so I think as we think about developmentally appropriate ways of interacting with our kids, if we're not careful, we even lapse into that idea that there's this kind of difference between parents. Man, when I discipline my kids, I am teaching them discipleship, right?
Oh, so right. Like those of you who don't know, we are recording this over Skype right now, so I can't see Andy. But Andy, if you could see me, it's like I'm fired up right now, man. You've got your congregation of one at the moment is on fire, and I'm hoping that those who hear this will feel the same way. But man, there's no separation between parenting and discipleship. I mean, that is wow. Thank you so much. Now, okay, I've got a son. I actually do have a son who is 13 years old. Let's just talk about it that way. And childhood is now over. He's now practicing being a man. He gets a couple of years to practice as a young man. What do I do as a dad in these moments to help him, help set him up for success as a man?
Yeah, and again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because you think so well about rites of passage and the way of actually taking a child and helping them kind of grow into adulthood. And spiritually speaking, you're a real expert on it. I've learned from you over the years. When I think about a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, I think there's a few things that come to mind. One, in healthy spiritual growth, right? And we know that when we say that, there are variations from that. Their kids are going to be way above it, and there are going to be kids lagging behind. But in healthy spiritual growth, as a dad, I want to watch my child as a 12, 13, 14-year-old begin to take greater faith ownership. There needs to be a transfer of the ownership of their faith. And so what I want to see in them and what I want to encourage in them is that I'm not going to be the one that initiates them having a quiet time or a time of devotion every day, right? I'm not going to be one that comes to them with a sign up for summer camp. I'm not going to be the one that comes to them and says, hey, let's go downtown and volunteer with the homeless ministry with our church that we volunteer with. What I'm looking for is I want to see them beginning to do some of those things on their own. I want to walk in their room at 13 and 14 after knocking on the door and open the door and find that they've been doing their quiet time. You know, I want to have them come to me and say, hey, Dad, I heard, in church that we got this mission trip coming up. That's something I really want to do. Can you sign me? Like, I want them to take greater ownership of their faith. And so as a parent, we can equip that. We can enable that by the posture we take. Discipleship is about proximity. So often we're either we're in different proximity with our children. Sometimes we're behind them, pushing them, right? Hard. Sometimes we're in front of them, pulling on them, right? Like a stubborn mule. And there's a time and a place for that. As they transition into 13, 14-year-olds, our proximity becomes a little bit different. Hopefully we're walking beside them a little more. Hopefully we're way behind them at times, and we look and they're leading out. They're in front of us, and they're taking some spiritual leadership in the youth ministry and in their community. And so as a parent of that age group child, we need to have that in mind, that that's the expectation, and then begin to kind of equip them appropriately to help them take that greater spiritual ownership. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay, I have just a few more minutes, and I want to make sure we get some time to talk about your book as well. So, but I think this is pretty crucial. Let's say now that I'm the parent of an 18-year-old finishing high school, about to kind of head out into the world, and now it's time for them to actually be a man. As a dad, what do I need to be doing there? And as ministers, what do we need to be teaching dads to do in that season?
I think there's a real thought that maybe we become more hands-off there. And I don't know that that's exactly the right way to talk about it. Surely what we want to see is, and I call it expanding levels of freedom, right? I mean, as a child becomes 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, you begin to give them more freedom and you begin to allow them to make mistakes and you walk them through that. And sometimes you have to bring the freedom back in. But the goal is that you're expanding their levels of freedom as they grow, and you're watching them handle situations. As an 18-year-old, the goal is not that they're done. The goal is that your role changes. You're no longer a police officer at that point or an air traffic controller. You're kind of a coach. You're on the sidelines more. They're on the playing field. They're the ones that are out there, making the tackles, running the play, whatever sports analogy you want. But you're the coach. Coaches are hands off in some way, right? I mean, they cast vision, they cast expectations, but then the execution happens on the field. I think our role as parents, when they get to be 18, when they get to be 19, is that coach who is on the sideline, helping with vision, helping with expectations, but then is there when they come off the field and says, hey, that went well, or that didn't go well. What do we need to do? It's very hands-on. It's a different kind of interaction. I think as ministers, the best thing we can do for parents at that point is honestly encouragement. Equipping has hopefully already been done at that point, and now what you're doing is you're just encouraging them and empowering them to lead.
You and Rick Burgess have written a 40-day devotional experience that will spur men on to more passionate pursuit of Christ-centered manhood. And yes, I did just read that off of your website.
Yeah,
that sound familiar? Listen, if I'm doing men's ministry, if I'm wanting to help dads, and if I'm wanting to help the teenage boys in my ministry, this sounds like an amazing resource. You guys break it down into 8 core characteristics of a man: identity, integrity, purpose, surrender, passion, commitment, compassion, and influence. Wow, this is well laid out. Tell us a little bit more about that, especially tell us where they can get a hold of it if they'd like to check it out.
Yeah, so real quickly, the idea was basically as Rick and I began to feel this burden for like helping men be, and teenage boys too, right? Helping them be the men that God have called them to be. The subtitle of the book is really kind of the heart of it. It's how to be a man pursuing Christ-centered masculinity. And so, the only definition of manhood, masculinity that's lasting is the person of Christ. Everything else is culturally influenced. The gospel perfects masculinity. And I would say that the gospel perfects femininity as well. That's a different book. I can't write that one. But this book, the idea of it is that we point them to Christ. That if we're going to be a man after God's own heart, we should, our lives should be lived, modeled after the life of Christ. And so we looked at Jesus's life and we asked the question, what can we as men in the 21st century learn from him? And so we really settled on these 8 characteristics that we see Christ exemplifying throughout the Gospels. You name them. And I think, and so then the idea was simply, let's spend a week challenging men to model each of these characteristics. And I think that framework's been very helpful. We also have something that's really cool. It's called the How to Be a Man Challenge. And it's a free downloadable curriculum. There's actually 4 of them. So we have an adult book, we have a student book. They're the same 8 core characteristics. And these challenges allow you to have a framework of like a weekly gathering, a weekly lesson plan, for lack of a better term, to help you process what you're learning. We have, and they're free. We have a small group guide for if men want to lead other men in a small group, if a youth pastor wants to lead students in a small group. We have a leader guide if a dad wants to walk his son through it. And we have one if 2 men, just like a mentor and a mentee, want to go through it. So those guides are free. There's a URL in the book that you can get that. And to me, that has been the biggest thing we've seen in this book. You add a layer of accountability on top of this content, and it's really neat to watch men soar. You can get the book on our website, lime360.com. You can search for How to Be a Man, or you can go to the How to Be a Man Challenge. .com, and you can find the book there. It's not on Amazon or anything like that. you got to come to us to get it. But that's how you can find it. We have we actually have a follow-up version to it coming out in October. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. I wish we had more time to talk about Youth Ministry 360. Guys, if you're a youth minister, go to ym360.com. They have a platform for some of the best games that you're going to have. They have an amazing game platform. They also do, in my opinion, the best camp for teenagers out there. So if you're looking for a place, maybe a new place to do camp, go check these guys out. But hey, listen, Andy, I can't thank you enough for your friendship, first of all, but for being with us. I appreciate it, brother.
Dude, it's such an honor, man. Thank you so much. And I'd love to be back. I'll beg my way back on anytime, buddy.
All right. His name is Andy Blanks, and I know you guys have enjoyed hearing him. Remember, if you want to hear anything else about Andy and see his work in action, you can go to ym360.com.
Practical Family Ministry is a collection of ideas for your church that offers practical and encouraging advice to those who want to make an impact in family ministry. Readers are reminded of the God-designed channels through which discipleship should occur, the church and the home. Parents, as well as ministry leaders, will be equipped to do their part to carry out the spiritual discipline of discipleship. Visit d6family.com to order your copy today.
All right, thank you to my friend Andy. Thank you for coming through for us on that interview. Thank you for giving us some of your time. And I'm so excited that the D6 podcast listeners are able to kind of be introduced to you, to Youth Ministry 360, to the conference, to the book, How to Be a Man. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. But listen, guys, it's not done. It's never just a one-show pony in the fall. We always like to come with 2 interviews. And so, Ron, let's go with the next one.
I want to welcome to the podcast Dr. Jimmy Myers, and I want to say welcome. And let me give a little background of this. And we've got 10 minutes, and I think I could spend all 10 of it just introducing you, sir. You spent 10 years as a youth minister, and you saw a need to open up counseling and therapy from a Christian perspective, and you've done so, and it took off in such a way you now have 4 different counseling centers in the Austin area, and you have a rare distinction of being able to accept insurance for those Christians coming to you, seeking counseling and seeing one of those 11 therapists that you have. You have been married 38 years to Beth. And I didn't say wonderful years. I said 38 years because we'll let you and she determine that part. You have three adult kids, ages 33, 35, and 37, and you are expecting your 7th grandchild. I would say that you can speak with authority on parenting. And the title of your book is Fearless Parenting. So welcome to the D6 podcast, Dr. Myers.
Ron, thank you so much.
Well, I want to kind of explore your book a little bit. You wrote Fearless Parenting, How to Raise Faithful Kids in a Secular Culture, and you co-authored this with an unknown guy who's dabbled in a little bit of research. His name's George Barna. I don't know how you found that guy, and, he just should be very privileged to have written with you. That's all I'm going to say.
Gave him a leg up.
So you two discovered something, and I love the premise of this. If I get this right, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you and he were talking based upon the preponderance of research that he has done, that the teenagers, the students in our homes today, in the year 2030 will be adults beginning their life, well into their life, contributing back to society, but the adults that we're projecting that they will become is not a pretty picture. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Describe what the research shows they'll be.
Just sort of amoral, a-religious. I laugh. It's kind of, you sum it up with a mess.
Yes.
Just so, we kind of think the snowflakes and, kind of what we're seeing on college campuses or even marching today. And we go, gosh, how'd we ever get here? Mm-hmm. Some of the things that George was depicting of these 2030, these kids or these adults in the year 2030, is heartbreaking, if not shocking.
So if I understand the premise of your book correct, what you're suggesting is that if we know what they're projected to look like now, we can counter-engineer and begin to work to prevent those issues from occurring. And in fact, you describe this as the 10 fundamental changes that need to occur in our home. in order to produce godly young adults that are ready to tackle life in a healthy manner. Can you walk us through one or two of those traits? I know we can't get into it a long time with this, but summarize your favorite or maybe two of your favorite, Dr. Myers.
Yeah, the big one and the one that, I just told George, I don't care what else makes it. We're going to talk about how we need to fundamentally change the overarching philosophy of our parenting. Because for the past 100, 150 years, Christian parents have been driven by fear of culture, fear of what that culture is going to do to my child. I'm afraid of culture. I'm afraid of the sins within the culture. I'm afraid of the other kids that know my children that are doing those sins. And so we just want to wall them away and separate them out. And so we've gone more of this protection kind of parenting as opposed to equipping them.
Well, play this out. Play out what this will do. What's the harm whenever, you even hear this preached from the pulpit, hey, I've got to keep my teenagers separate from the sin of the world. Play that out for us. What does that mean if we keep them separate and they grow into adulthood in a totally separate preparatory manner?
Had a mom said she was pulling her child out of school because the science teacher used profanity. And I said, well, I can understand you being upset about that. However, what would happen if all Christian families pulled the Christian kids out of all the public schools in America?
That happened in the 1970s.
Yeah. I mean, what would that look like? I mean, and she said, well, it would be horrible. I said, well, absolutely it is. And God didn't he didn't say, go ye therefore and build a wall around your house.
Yeah.
He said, go ye therefore and engage culture. And we're spending so much time preventing our kids from engaging with culture. We're not taking the time to equip them and prepare them to engage in culture and win. And I think sometimes our children, I think a lot of times we as parents believe the old inherit the win model that, the non-believing atheists, those are the open-minded, loving, tolerant, those are the really educated people. Are the uneducated rubes who cling to their guns and religion. And what we find is that simply is factually incorrect. We do quite well when it comes to the highest echelons of academia. Christianity does really, really well. And we just assume we're on the intellectual low ground, and we're not even going to go there. So I think our churches can do a lot better job. And I know, and forget about what our churches are doing, for the parents to take personal responsibility for their children. Say, I'm going to equip my child to engage culture.
Dr. Myers, that's exactly what the D6 podcast is all about, is based upon Deuteronomy 6. How do we get parents involved in the as-you-go moments of everyday life so that we can equip them from worldview and be prepared to engage and win? And be, I've often described it as we prepare to launch our kids as battleships. And I use the analogy that our U.S. military calls their military a defense system, not an offense system. We're there to defend our faith. And if prepared, if attacked, we're ready to engage and win. Our military is designed to do that with what's called battlefield multipliers. How can we start working on some battlefield multipliers in our kids' lives as parents in this culture? Give us a couple of examples.
I will. And I'm going to tell this one very, very quick little story.
Yeah.
Gary Habermas was interviewed in A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. He's the man. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Gary or not, but he's the man around the world who is known for being able to debate the historicity of the resurrection. And for 30 years, he's debated everyone there is to debate at Oxford and Stanford and Harvard. And we're talking upper echelons. And when you do academic debates, it's not just thank you all for coming at the end. You're judged.
Yes.
There's a panel or the audience says who won this debate. So I had Dr. Habermas from one of my doctoral seminars, and he was telling about some of these debates and what worked and what didn't. And in between, during a break, I went up to him and I said, well, you shared a lot about the points that you made that really scored with the naturalistic atheist, what points did they use that really scored in the debates that they won? And he said, he looked at me and he said, I never lost.
Wow.
So, over 30 years of debating at Harvard and Yale with Anthony Flew, Richard Dawkins. I mean, you just name the most famous atheists in the world, and he never lost a debate on whether the resurrection of Jesus is likely happening.
Wow.
So we don't stand on an intellectual low ground.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
If we can equip our kids to know that we don't take a back seat to anybody.
Right. So our parents can begin to have those conversations. Give me 30 seconds of what parents should be doing in discussions at home to prepare their kids to engage and win. 30 to 60 seconds.
You don't have to have a college or seminary degree. There are books out there. Everything Lee Strobel writes, get it, because it's written in such understandable, easy to comprehend. It's not written for academics. And there's a ton of books that are available. We list them in one of our chapters of the book. There's even things that you can do for younger children to equip them to be able to defend their faith.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug right here. Lee Strobel will be on the main stage at D6 this September for us. So, and he's going to be tackling the very topic that you're talking about. So those of who will be coming to attend, I want to say to you, first of all, you're quick to point to other people, whether it's Gary or Lee or whomever, but I want to point our listeners to you. If you want to dive a little deeper in this and find out more about those 10 fundamental changes that you can make, you need to go to Amazon right now and pick up Fearless Parenting by Jimmy Myers and George Barna. And you need to dive in deeper to this. And we're going to have you back on another time, maybe a few months down the road, and talk further, because I just don't think this conversation was over. It went by way too quick. And if you want to learn...
I'm sorry, I get a little passionate.
Well, that's the kind of people we want on the D6 podcast, and it just, man, it's good. So you need to go to the timothyscenter.com, and on that website, you're going to find Jimmy Myers' personal website and other links to places you can dig a little deeper in these areas. He also has a podcast as well, and we believe in promoting solid resources. So if you are a big avid listener to podcasts, go to his. It's Paradox Podcast, and let me spell that for you. P-A-I-R-A-D-O-C-S, Pair of Docs. And that's he and his son, both doctors, both leading in these discussions that we're talking about to help equip parents and people with everyday life problems. Dr. Myers, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Ron, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Jeremy, what'd you think about his fear-based parenting, those 10 fundamental things that we can do? I mean, man, he hit us with a lot of content in a very short time.
It makes me glad that I already have my children, and that
yeah, exactly.
that as we look towards the future, that's going to be our own kids' problems. Let them deal with that.
That's
stuff.
right. But I love the intentionality of thinking long-term, what we're instilling in them today to get them to years that we may not live to see. I don't know.
Feels more and more like every day I'm not going to make it. But
I'm telling you. Yeah. Anyway, 2030 seems like a long ways away. I know it's not.
Okay, listen, guys.
Thank you, Jimmy.
We have a great show. Next week, we have Allie Thayer and Robert Beeson. Tell us a little bit about Robert, and then I'll tell about Allie. We're going to switch it this time.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I normally go second. So Robert is kind of this who's who behind the scene of people he has worked with. In fact, you know him very well because you introduced me to him originally. Mm-hmm. Robert Beeson has worked with people like Jars of Clay, Third Day, Caedmon's Call, Michael W. Smith, on we can go. And so he's lived in that music world, and he really hit a bump in the road in his own personal life and has taken that bump in the road and turned it into a very valuable ministry, because nearly half of Christian parents out there have hit the same bump he has, and he is helping them with that hurdle.
And we're going to have Allie Thayer, who is going to be helping us cover a topic that the church probably doesn't even know where to begin with. I'm sure there's not a ton of experience out there, and she is kind of bringing a voice to that, and we want to make sure we share that. And she kind of helps women who are going through postpartum depression. And it's not just women. They have husbands sometimes too in this scenario, and they are going through the support of it. And it's just not a fun journey. Mm-hmm. And she is kind of a champion of that, and she's going to help teach churches how to champion that. So that'll be well worth your time next week. We hope you'll join us. We thank you so much for listening. I always want to remind you that we are on iTunes. They have a place there to leave reviews if you want to. We welcome that. It means so much. You think we don't look at it, but we do because we have egos. So we're looking at those reviews. Please leave them there. And you can communicate with us anytime through Twitter. We love hanging out with you guys online. Please have a great week of ministry. Can't wait to talk to you next week.